Welcome to Signal Ahead. I'm Alfred. Today's briefing, Cybersecurity. Thursday, July 23. This is the synthesis above the noise, not the headlines, but the deep currents beneath them. Let's get into it. There's a story hiding in plain sight this week, and it isn't any single breach. It's a shape. If you'd only glanced at the headlines, you'd have seen the usual parade: a ransomware crew halting dairy production in the American Midwest, a Windows privilege escalation exploit dropped by someone calling themselves Nightmare Eclipse, an 11-byte payload capable of freezing a web server's memory until the process is killed. Each of these looks like its own little catastrophe, unrelated to the next. And that's precisely the illusion I want to dismantle in the next hour, because the connective tissue between them tells you where this whole field actually stands. Here's the non-obvious thread. For 30 years, the defender's core mental model has been the perimeter and the patch. You build a wall, you find the holes, you fill them faster than the attacker can find them. It's a race, but it's a comprehensible race. Attacker looks for a flaw, defender fixes the flaw. What's happening now is that both the flaw and the fix are migrating into a layer where human judgment has been quietly removed from the loop. And once you notice that, the week's chaos stops looking like a list and starts looking like a single argument. Consider the trust relationships involved. A remote code execution bug lands in the core of a content management system that runs a staggering fraction of the web, not in some careless plugin, but in the bare install itself, exploitable by an anonymous request from anyone. The response was to force updates through the auto-update system, which is to say, the software patched itself at scale without asking. That's a marvel and a warning in the same breath. When you can update millions of sites without human intervention, you have also built a channel through which anything can be pushed without human intervention. The mechanism that saves you and the mechanism that could doom you are the same mechanism. Now hold that thought against the malware side of the ledger. The infostealers making the rounds, the ones walking out of enterprises with saved passwords, live session tokens, and synced cloud documents, largely get in because a human being pasted a command into a dialog box and pressed enter. That is the old world. Social engineering, a person tricked into a click, but look at what's arriving right behind it. Botnets that hunt specifically for exposed AI services, the image generators, the local model runners, the workflow builders that teams stand up fast and firewall late, harvesting thousands of cloud keys along the way. Malicious code packages that phone home through blockchain infrastructure spread across multiple chains, because you can't take down a command and control server that lives on a public ledger. Phishing emails stuffed with hidden text designed not to fool you, but to fool the AI filter reading your inbox. The attacker has noticed something. The attacker has noticed that we are handing decisions to machines, and the machines are easier to lie to than we are. And this is the pivot that reframes everything else. The genuinely new anxiety this week isn't about a clever exploit. It's about a browser extension flaw that lets a malicious extension simulate clicks and trigger an AI assistant's pre-approved actions, quietly reaching into your email, your documents, your calendar, your customer records. There was no vulnerability in the classical sense. Nobody bypassed a firewall. The AI was simply given the authority to act on connected services, and someone found a way to be the hand that moves it. When you let a model both interpret a command and execute it, you have deleted the oversight step that was doing the real security work all along. The threat was never only the outsider at the gate. It's the blind trust we're placing in the automated actor we've invited inside. So the field, right now, is caught in a genuine transition, and it's worth being honest that the defenders see it too. There's an entire strategic bet being placed on what's being called agentic defense. AI systems that detect and remediate threats automatically, matching the attacker's speed with a speed of their own. Governments are standing up new clearinghouses to coordinate vulnerability response in this AI-shaped world, though nobody's quite sure yet how they'll work. Everyone senses the same thing. The tempo has crossed a threshold where a human reading an alert and deciding what to do is simply too slow. So we automate the response, which means we're now fighting autonomy with autonomy and quietly removing ourselves from both sides of the exchange. That's the state of the field as I read it. The perimeter dissolved years ago. We know that story. What's happening now is subtler and more consequential. Authority itself is being delegated to systems that can be manipulated, and the safeguards we're building to keep pace are made of the very same delegation. Over the next 2 segments, I want to trace how we got here, and then ask the uncomfortable question, whether a defense built on trusting machines can survive attackers who have learned that machines are the easiest thing in the world to deceive. Let me tell you what all of it has in common, because at first glance it looks like nothing at all. Consider the week we've just surveyed. An archiving tool that has quietly compressed the world's files for 2 decades gets a flaw that turns opening an archive into surrendering your machine. Publishing platform that runs a staggering share of the web ships a fix for a hole so fundamental that a bare installation, with no plugins, no theme, no embellishment whatsoever, could be commandeered by an anonymous request from a stranger. A cryptographic library, perhaps the single most deployed piece of security software on the planet, can be persuaded to hoard memory it will never use, undone by 11 bytes. 11. You could write those in the margin of a napkin. Now the tempting reading is that this is a story about carelessness, that somewhere, someone should have been more careful, and there is always a version of that which is true, but I want to resist it, because carelessness is a moral category, and what we are looking at is a structural one. The deep current beneath all this noise is not that people are sloppy. It is that we have built the entire edifice of modern life on a foundation of shared, load-bearing components that almost nobody owns, almost nobody funds, and almost everybody trusts absolutely. Think about what trust actually means in this context. When you install a package for a front-end build tool, you are not merely adding a convenience. You are extending an unbroken chain of trust from your machine outward to a maintainer you have never met, and then to that maintainer's dependencies, and to their dependencies in turn, until the chain reaches somewhere you cannot see and could not audit if you tried. And so when malicious packages slip into that ecosystem, 7 of them, in one recent case, reaching out to blockchain infrastructure of all things to receive their orders, the astonishing part is not that it happened. It is that it doesn't happen every hour of every day. The whole apparatus runs on the assumption that the thing named as trustworthy is, in fact, the thing you get. That assumption is precisely what is being dismantled from every direction at once. North Korean operators who hide malware inside the innocent geometry of an image file, delivered as a coding challenge to a hopeful job applicant. They are exploiting the trust a candidate places in an employer, and the trust a developer places in a project that looks, at a glance, entirely ordinary. The million phishing emails that smuggle invisible text past our newest and most celebrated defenses. They are exploiting the trust we have decided to place in a machine that reads on our behalf. And here is where the current runs deepest and coldest, because we are now installing new links in the chain faster than we can possibly reason about them. We are handing artificial agents the authority both to interpret an instruction and to carry it out, to read the world and to act on it, with the critical pause of human judgment quietly removed from between the two. We stand up model runners and workflow builders in an afternoon and firewall them the following week, if we remember at all, and a patient piece of software scans the open sea of the internet, harvesting cloud keys by the thousand from services their owners forgot were listening. A browser extension that can quietly simulate a click can, it turns out, persuade an AI assistant to reach into your mail, your documents, your calendar, and act as though you had asked it to. Do you see the pattern? In every case, the failure is not in the malicious act. The failure is upstream in the moment of trust, the moment we decided that a name, a file, a package, an agent, a request could be taken at face value. We have spent 40 years relentlessly optimizing for that convenience. Reuse, don't rebuild. Import, don't write. Automate, don't supervise. Every one of those instincts is economically rational and taken singly correct. And their sum is a civilization whose critical infrastructure is a vast, invisible web of borrowed trust, each strand of which is a potential point of collapse. The regulators sense it, even if they cannot name it. When authorities compel a platform to open the microphone and the camera and the screen to rival assistants, they are wrestling, clumsily, with the same question. Who gets to be trusted with what, and on whose say-so? And the historical irony, for those who care to notice it, is that we began this whole enterprise trying to build systems we did not have to trust, a portable voice scrambler wired by hand in wartime, precisely so that no eavesdropper's presence need be assumed away. We have somehow arrived at the opposite. We assume everything away, and the bill for that assumption is now arriving in 11-byte increments. There's a temptation, when you look at a week like this one, to see nothing but a torrent of unrelated bad news. A compression tool with a code execution flaw here. A content management system that ships with a hole in its very foundation there. Some infostealer walking out of enterprises with browser tokens. A dairy subsidiary shut down by ransomware. And you could be forgiven for filing each of these under its own heading and moving on. But that would be a mistake, because underneath the noise there are two currents running, and they tell us where the ground is shifting. The first current is about trust, and specifically about the collapse of the places we used to store it. Consider what actually got breached this week, not the fortified perimeter of some bank, a third-party support ticket system, a legacy diagnostics platform inherited through acquisition, a Lab Central portal. A certificate authority, the very institution whose entire reason for existing is to be trustworthy on our behalf, losing code-signing certificates to a subgroup of a Chinese cybercrime operation. Now sit with that last one for a moment, because it's the whole story in miniature. A code-signing certificate is a notarized promise. It says, this software is who it claims to be, vouched for by an authority you trust. When that gets stolen, the attacker doesn't break the lock, they mint their own keys. The malicious becomes indistinguishable from the legitimate, and every downstream system that was built to check the signature happily waves it through. That pattern trust delegated to a party you never directly examined is everywhere now. The 7 poison packages targeting a popular front-end build tool. The fake coding challenges hiding a 4-stage payload inside innocent-looking image files. The point is not that developers are careless. The point is that the modern software estate is an enormous inherited debt of assumptions. You trust the package because it's popular. You trust the popular package because everyone trusts it. Nobody actually looked. And so the thing to watch, the second-order implication, is that attackers have figured out it's far cheaper to compromise a source of trust than to compromise 10,000 endpoints downstream of it. Why pick every lock in the building when you can bribe the locksmith? The second current is subtler and, I think, more consequential. We are wiring autonomous machines into the middle of everything, and we are doing it faster than we are thinking about what happens when they are deceived. Consider the flaw in that browser-based AI assistant, where a malicious extension could simulate clicks and trigger the assistant to act on your behalf, reaching into your mail, your documents, your calendar. The vulnerability isn't really in the code. It's in the architecture of trust itself. We have built a helper that both interprets a command and executes it, with no human standing between the interpretation and the action. That gap, the gap where a person used to pause and say, hang on, that doesn't look right, is precisely the gap we have been so eager to close in the name of convenience. And it scales. 1 million emails were found smuggling hidden text past AI security filters, exploiting the fact that a language model reads differently than a human eye does. Botnet hunting exposed AI services, harvesting cloud keys from image generators and workflow builders that teams stand up fast and firewall late. That last phrase is the whole tragedy, isn't it? Stand up fast, firewall late. The autonomous agent is powerful precisely because it acts without asking, which means the security question is no longer only, can an attacker get in, but can an attacker convince the machine that already has the keys to do something on their behalf? Blind trust in a system that both reads and acts is not a bug you patch. It's a design decision you either make deliberately or drift into. So what should you actually watch for going forward? Watch the plumbing, not the headlines. The 11-byte payload that freezes a server patched quietly, with no advisory, no changelog, no announcement, is a warning that the fixes you most need are often the ones nobody trumpets. Watch the acquired systems, the legacy portals, the third-party dependencies you forgot you had, because that's where this week's breaches actually landed. And watch above all, the seam between interpretation and action in every AI tool you deploy. Ask the unglamorous question, when this thing decides, who checks? The 2 young men sentenced this week for paralyzing a transport network remind us that the human stakes are real and the consequences, occasionally, do arrive. The machines don't get sentenced, they get trusted, and the work ahead is less about building higher walls than about relearning, In an age of delegated authority and autonomous agents, the oldest security discipline there is, knowing exactly whom and what you are trusting and being honest with yourself about how little you've actually verified. That's the signal for today. The noise will keep coming, we'll keep finding what's underneath it. This has been Signal Ahead with Alfred. Until next time.